everybody. Thanks so much for coming to this session, candidate information session for the upcoming local government election. My name's Allison Habkirk. I'm super happy to be here and happy to meet you all, and pleased to know that you are interested in the local government election and maybe interested in running. I have a few words that I just want to offer to just provide some instruction about what we're going to do tonight, and so that everybody's kind of on the same page. My role is to be facilitating the session tonight. I want to start today by respectfully acknowledging that the land on which we gather to host this meeting is on the traditional unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. And I'm very pleased to be joining you from the traditional territory of the Coast Salish Tsartlip band. Today, I'm here with staff representatives from the City of Courtenay, Village of Cumberland, and the Comox Valley Regional District to provide a general overview of what it's like to serve as a local government elected official. I'm going to quickly introduce you to them all and ask them to sort of wave their hands so that you know who they are. They also all have their names and titles on the screen that you can see. We have with us from the Comox Valley Regional District, Jake Martins, the General Manager of Corporate Services. Jennifer Steele, the communications advisor from the CVRD, and Ingrid Sly, our digital advisor, who knows all things digital. And if you're having any challenges, you could type a note to her in chat, and she will help you. She's already been immensely helpful tonight. From the City of Courtenay, we have Kate O'Connell, Director of Corporate Support Services. Kate, you want to give us a wave? Great. And Adriana Proton, Manager of Legislative Services, and they are together the Chief Election and Deputy Elections Officer for Courtenay. And from the Village of Cumberland, we have Kevin. Oh, is Kevin with us tonight? No, he's not, is he? No, I'm sorry. Rachel Parker is with us from the District of Cumberland and the Chief Elections Officer. So we've got a lot of brain power here with us tonight, and thank you all for joining us, because I said a few minutes ago, these are the people that really know stuff, and I'm delighted to have them here. Now a little Zoom 101 to get us started. Today we have residents both calling in to hear the discussion and some attending the session virtually. The session's being recorded so that we can share it and post it on our websites for others to view who are not able to attend. As we have a number of participants here with us today, so everyone except the speakers are muted to ensure disruptions and background noise is kept to a minimum. And finally, it should be noticed that we're minimizing visual tools within this presentation to ensure that those callers at home experience the same presentation as those online. At the end of the presentations, there will be a specific opportunity for questions, but you're also encouraged to ask questions throughout the presentation. And you can do that by putting them in chat. For those of you joining online, you can enter the question and answer found at the bottom of your Zoom window at any time. However, we'll only be answering them at the end of the presentations. You'll be able to see the questions. If you notice that someone else has asked a question you would also like answered, you can add your support to that question by clicking the thumbs up under the question. As we're recording this virtual open house, when you ask a question via the question and answer, please tick the box to make yourself anonymous. Otherwise, you'll be identified by your Zoom name. Questions or comments placed in the chat that are disrespectful or inappropriate, and I don't expect any of those from anybody tonight. But if you are inclined that way, we're going to be monitoring that, and we'll have to delete them and remove them from the chat. So please, we really ask you to be respectful to both the staff that are joining us and to your fellow attendees. If you're calling in to join us today, you'll also have an opportunity to ask questions during the question and answer portion. After we answer the questions asked by those who have joined us online, we'll unmute those of you who have called in. To ask your questions, say, I have a question. Depending upon the number of call-in attendees, we'll either call on you to speak using the last 4 digits of your phone number, or just have you ask your question right away. So for example, you'll say, I have a question. Our team will respond by caller 2345, please ask your question. And for privacy, please don't identify yourself by name when you speak, and please remember to be respectful of others at the session. And again, if you have any technical details or need assistance during the presentations, you can call on either Jennifer Steele or Ingrid Sly using the chat function located on your screen. If you require a phone number to call, please call 250-334-6087. We've entered this number into the chat as well if you need to reference it, and we'd be happy to take troubleshooting, troubleshooting any problems that might occur. Phew, that was a lot of information. I'll also say that the staff are going to monitor the chat. I'm challenged to share a screen, talk to you all, and monitor the chat along the way. So Jake and Jennifer and others, I'll rely on you to sort of draw my attention to anything that's going on in the chat that I should maybe attend to. So just thank you again, and let's get started. I'll just share my screen here. Ingrid, did that share successfully?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. My screen looks kind of strange for some reason. So you're thinking about running for office, and that's what the session tonight is all about. And I should just say that my background and how I came to do a session like that is I'm a recovering elected official, as my court would say. I spent 3 terms in office on my local council. My home community is the district of Central Saanich, just outside of Victoria. I live in Brentwood Bay. And I spent the first 2 terms on council as the councillor and my last term as mayor. And I should also confess that I was a staff person before that. I'm a trained registered professional planner and spent a good chunk of time working for the City of Nanaimo as a senior planner, and before that with Capital Regional District. So I sat on a number of different sides of the table, and you know, came to run for office really because of my interest in my community and my experience in local government. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is my personal perspective in both as an elected official and now working as an educator and consultant for municipalities and regional districts across the province. My first message to you is that I think being an elected official is a really tough job. And I commend you on your courage to think about doing this for your community. And I think it gets more challenging every year. And there was a time when there was a lot of prestige in being an elected official, and maybe less so now. And just to support that perspective, I'll just show you a little bit of data from 2019 Angus Reid poll of Canadians, which concluded that nearly 2/3 of all Canadians say politicians can't be trusted. And 1/3 believe that they're primarily motivated by personal gain. You know, that doesn't make you feel really good, especially if what you are motivated by is to give something to your community and contribute. But, you know, the general public has become a bit cynical about elected officials, and that makes the job really tough. Now, the good news is, this is also from the same study, that municipal government elected officials fare much better than their provincial and federal counterparts. And so that on the upside, generally, Canadians respect their local elected officials more than the senior levels of government. So that's good. That's a good start. But still, it's a tough job. I like to think of the role of an elected official in your local community is it's a role of community service. So just like you would want to join the Rotary Club or sit on the board of the Chamber of Commerce or work for a social service, volunteers for a social service agency, this is a way of really giving to your community. And it's an incredibly powerful role that you can play in managing the affairs of the municipality or the regional district, or an electoral area, and giving something to your fellow citizens. And I think it really helps to think of it as a mostly volunteer job, because the hourly wage is not high, and you won't get rich doing this job. And it's really a job of community service. And I'm very hopeful that the commitment to community service in our communities will really be alive and well in elections going forward, and especially with the younger generations who are very committed to giving to their communities. So when I first put this presentation together, I really thought about all the things I didn't know when I first got elected, and created this sort of laundry list of questions, things that I thought that people new to local government might be curious about, or might be kind of mystified about, or confused about, and where having a little bit of information might be quite helpful. So here's a whole list of questions that I'm going to try and cover today, and hopefully you'll find the information helpful to you in preparing yourself for an election run, and hopefully preparing yourself to be an elected official. I should say that you ought to be reassured that if you get elected, virtually all municipalities and regional districts now spend a huge amount of time onboarding elected officials and orienting them and providing opportunities for learning. So I'm just going to scratch the surface. Should you be fortunate enough to be elected, you'll go into all of these topics in way more detail than I will in the next hour and a half or so. One of the things that I suggest you do really early on is really reflect on what's motivating you to run for office, and just ask yourself, well, why do I want to do this? What is prompting me to want to do this? And I think there's lots of really good reasons for running for office, including that you just want to contribute to your community. You just want to be a leader in the community, and we want to be part of a council that is responsible for managing the affairs of the local government. You might think that being an elected official is really an honorable job, and you'd like to have that experience. You might want to be a role model for others, and maybe your children. And for me, this was a big motivation. I really wanted my children to see me play a role in my community and really stand up and give. And I like to think that that had a really positive effect on them. And maybe one day they will do something similar in whatever it is, whether it's their professions or in politics. But you might want to be a role model. You might just believe that, a healthy democratic government needs committed, honest, and informed elected officials. And we really do. Democracy just doesn't maintain itself. We need to give to it. We need to maintain it and support it. And we really need good people to be elected officials in our system of government. Or maybe you want to lead change in your community. You think that the community could go in a better direction or be better managed. And so you think you bring some skills that would contribute to that. All of those are really, I think, good reasons for running for elected office. There's some other reasons that maybe are not such great reasons to be running for office. And I think if some of these things are motivating you, then you might really want to reflect on whether you'll be able to be satisfied as an elected official. So if you're really mad as heck at the incumbents, if that's what's really driving you forward, then you'll find the 4 years very long, because you're going to have to do more than just complain about what a lousy job others are doing. You actually have to start doing things and contributing positively. If you just have one single project, you want a road, you want a rezoning or a trail built or a recreation facility built, you just have one concern, again, it could be a very long 4 years, because you will have to turn your mind to a vast array of problems and issues and challenges and opportunities in your community. And one single interest will not be enough. And especially if your colleagues around your table don't happen to agree with you and don't move it forward. So that's it's a start, but it's not maybe enough. If you're running for office because you need the money, as I said earlier, you're not going to get rich doing this job. It's probably not going to make you really happy. If you think government can run like a business, you might want to think again, because, you know, if local governments ran like a business, we wouldn't have fire departments because they're money losers. We would stop doing that business. So government's way more complicated than businesses. All of the local governments represented in the Comox Valley have hundreds of different services, super complicated, and just not as simple as making running shoes or having a business that produces a small range of products. If you think a counselor's job is really easy, it's not. I'm here to tell you, and I'm sure any of the incumbents would tell you that it's a really challenging job. It tests your intellectual capacities, your analytical skills. You're presented with terribly challenging choices sometimes, and it will keep you awake at night. Not an easy job. If you think it'll help your business, or you think you could help your sponsors' businesses, we have very good laws in British Columbia around conflicts of interest and deriving personal benefit from being an elected official, and you'll find yourself in trouble if you go down that road. So those are maybe some of the reasons why you might want to reconsider if that's why you're running for council or for the board. I want to just talk just for a second about where local governments get their powers from, because I think we just don't think about this really, and we're like, well, how is it that we come to have local governments anyways? Where do they get authority from? How does that happen? And everything in Canada really flows from the Constitution Act. So Section 92 of the Constitution Act, our federation's legislation. Section 92 allocates responsibility to the provinces for local government. So all of the powers are divided between the federal government and provincial government in Canada, and the responsibility for local government goes to the provinces. So that's what happens in British Columbia, and it kind of looks like this in graphic form. You have the Canadian Constitution, the overarching legislation for Canada. And then Section 92 gives power for local governments to the province of BC, and then the province of BC makes legislation and has effectively delegated, created a system of local government and delegated authorities to municipalities and other local governments through two primary acts of the legislature. One is the Community Charter and one is the Local Government Act. And the Community Charter gives authority to municipalities to do what they do, and provides all of the legislation related to council, the operating of council. And the Local Government Act has the legislation related to land use planning, all of the regional district legislation, and then legislation related to elections. So we have two primary acts in British Columbia that provide guidance to local governments. And then there's a whole myriad of other acts that are relevant to local government, but these are the two big ones, and you'll hear them referenced all the time. And I should just say that, you know, in the rest of Canada, most provinces just have one act, but we're kind of special here in BC. And just because of the history of local government reform in British Columbia, we've ended up with two in these. They have two slightly different focuses. So what do municipalities do anyways? Really, they have two primary functions. They deliver services to businesses and residents. So all those things that we take for granted, roads and sidewalks and parks and recreation centers, and when you turn your water on in the morning, all of those services are generally provided by municipalities, sometimes in partnership with the regional district, but they deliver services to residents and businesses. The second thing is they provide this governance mechanism for the people, the community, to make their views known and to vote in the elections and to pay the taxes. So it's a governance mechanism for the community to speak. And what do regional districts do? Well, they also provide services to member jurisdictions. They enable jurisdictions to provide services and partnerships. This is a very important part of the role of regional districts in BC. It's a mechanism that allows municipalities and electoral areas to come together and provide shared services in partnership. And the Comox Valley has a good system of this. And it's, I would say it's well developed in the Comox Valley. Regional districts also provide general government for the electoral areas, so the unincorporated areas in British Columbia. General government is provided through the regional district system. And regional districts are also an administrative agency for various purposes like borrowing and other administrative functions. I'll offer an editorial comment. I think that regional districts are often misunderstood by people. They're not technically an order of government. They're a federation of local governments, and their powers are derived from the member jurisdictions. So as often people think about the regional district as being them, it's really us. All of the decisions are made by the member jurisdictions that come together. And they really enable municipalities and electoral areas to work together and to develop these partnerships for shared services that often municipalities and electoral areas wouldn't be able to provide alone if they were just trying to do it themselves. And I think the Comox Valley is a really good example of this. And virtually all services of regional districts are voluntary. There are a few mandated services mandated in legislation, but by and large, the overwhelming number of services are services that have been voluntarily joined by the member jurisdictions. The community charter says that municipalities have responsibility for 4 different purposes. First, to provide good government to their community, to provide for services, laws, and other matters for community benefit, to steward the public assets. So it's the council and the organization's responsibility to look after the assets of the municipalities, the roads, the sidewalks, the parks, all those assets, and to foster the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the community. So that's what the legislation says municipalities are supposed to be doing. I'm just going to turn my mind to what I think of as some of the real fundamentals, things that hopefully you'll want to know about before you run for office. First of all, you're going to swear an oath if you're elected. And this year we have in British Columbia, we have a new oath of office. And you'll note down the page here, there's a bullet that says, I'll carry out my duties with integrity. I'll be accountable for the decisions I make. I will be respectful of others, and I'll demonstrate leadership and collaboration. And these are what's referred to as the foundational principles of responsible conduct. And there's been a lot of energy spent on helping councils and regional boards learn about responsible conduct, how to be respectful, how to act with integrity. And these foundational principles are now included in the oath of office. Also in this new oath of office is the very last bullet says, I will perform my duties of I will perform the duties of my office in accordance with the law, which means you're committing to functioning, working within the bounds of the law. I mean, it seems kind of crazy that you have to say that, but it's been felt that this should be part of the oath of office, and that you will have to commit to this in front of a justice of the peace generally, and swear that you will uphold these commitments. And when I took this oath of office, I found it kind of humbling, and I did take it seriously. And I encourage you to really think about it and kind of hold the moment when you're there, because you're taking on this responsibility of stewarding, of shepherding your community on behalf of the constituents. And in order to do that, you need to take this oath of office. Just a couple more things about responsible conduct. Here again, here are the foundational principles of responsible conduct. I'm sure as part of your onboarding, you'll learn more about this, but there are the 4 foundational principles. And these have been worked on, and the work around responsible conduct has been going on for about 6 years in British Columbia. Very much a topic of conversation, very much a topic at the Union of BC Municipalities convention every year. It's a work in progress, and I'm sure you'll hear lots about it if you're elected. And by the time the election is held, October 15th, there's going to be an online self-directed course available for all local government elected officials in BC about the foundational principles and about good conduct on your councils and boards. So stay tuned for that. So what does it take to be a successful elected official? This is my again, editorial comment. I think it takes really good listening skills, and this is really hard after you've been in a campaign, particularly if it's a hard fought campaign, and where you're out talking at people, answering questions, trying to persuade people that you're the best person for the job. And then soon after that, you're elected to a council of 5 or 7, or elected to the regional board. And all of a sudden you're one of a whole group of people, and you really have to start listening to others. And it is really helpful to have developed good listening skills in your lifetime. This is a sort of a top skill, I think, of really successful elected officials. You need the ability to process a lot of information. Council and regional board agendas are at the very least hundreds of pages, sometimes upwards of 1,000 pages. There's a lot of information to process, and you need to develop skills around managing that information and learning how to process it quickly so that you can make informed decisions. You ought to have a commitment to upholding the law, to working within the boundaries of the law. You ought to commit to the foundational principles of responsible conduct so that you behave well at the council or board table. I think you ought to have high ethical principles because they will be tested as an elected official. You'll find yourself in tough ethical positions. You ought to be prepared to work really hard, put in a lot of hours and a lot of thinking in making decisions. Having an ability to work with others is super helpful because this is, again, you're going to have your own perspectives, you're going to have your own points of view, but at the end of the day, this is group decision making, and the better able you are to work with others and to find common ground and to negotiate, positive outcomes, the more successful you will be as an elected official. So learning those skills can be really, really helpful and will increase your ability to do the things that you wanted to do when you ran for office. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about what are the attributes of an exceptional council, and these would apply equally to a board. And this comes out of a fantastic organization in California called the Institute for Local Government. So it's sort of the equivalent of our Local Government Leadership Academy. They produce wonderful materials. I recommend them to you. So they've sort of distilled down the attributes of a successful council to about 6 points, which I'll just go over really quickly. Exceptional councils develop a sense of team, and this isn't about groupthink. This is about the ability to work with, as a council, work with the CAO and the staff, so that you've really, you're working in partnership and towards common goals. Exceptional councils have clear roles and responsibilities that are well understood and that you actually adhere to. So you really understand what the role of council is, you understand what your role as an elected official is, and that you're not spending your time micromanaging, but you're up in the strategic policy making area. Exceptional councils honor the relation with staff and with each other. So you can agree to disagree, you behave well, you have a code of conduct that you use and live by. Exceptional councils routinely conduct effective meetings. So your meetings are well run, they're productive, they're constructive, they're effective, you make your decisions in a timely manner. That the debate doesn't become personalized, that you display responsible conduct. Exceptional councils hold themselves and the city or the regional district accountable. So you behave with integrity, you set goals, you track your progress, you celebrate success, you adhere to your protocols and your codes of conduct. And then finally, exceptional councils have members who practice continuous personal learning and development. And I'll come back to this later, but this, to me, being an elected official is a learning job. You will never stop learning. If you want to be effective, you really need to be constantly learning about the issues and the matters and the processes so that you can be effective. I just want to say a little bit about what governance is. We throw this word around a lot, like, okay, the community charter says, good governance is your responsibility. So what does that really mean in practice? And I think that there are sort of 4 big buckets of responsibilities that councils and boards have. First of all, setting the strategic direction, knowing where you're going. This is in large part done by your official community plan and your strategic plan and your long-term financial plans, that kind of thing. But setting the strategic direction, where is the community going? Where are you trying to take it? So being proactive rather than reactive. The second big area of responsibility is managing the resources of the municipality or the regional district. So allocating the resources, both human and financial. And this is almost the first thing you do. If you get elected to a municipality, you'll have the budget dropped in front of you and you're going to have to make big decisions about where the resources go. You have a role of oversight and reporting. So oversight of the chief administrative officer and then reporting every year in an annual report. And then the fourth bucket is of responsibility is managing risks. So managing your assets, managing the legal risks of the municipality. So those are the 4 big areas of responsibility that you'll have to be involved in. And then I'll just touch on this because we also use this word, good governance, and the responsible conduct discussions always refer to good governance. And this is sort of internationally accepted characteristics of good governance, that good governance is transparent. So the people, the voters can see what you're doing. You're accountable, follows the rule of law. You're responsive to your constituents. You hear what they're asking for. That governance is carried out equitably and inclusively. It's consensus oriented, so you're focused more on agreeing than on disagreeing, and trying really hard to come to consensus rather than just simple majorities, and that government is really effective and efficient. So that's typically what's thought of as good governance. I just wanted to say just a special note about electoral areas, because electoral area directors, because they are special in our system, an especially challenging role, I think. So this is actually out of the Comox Valley Regional District roles and responsibilities available on the website. That electoral area directors are elected by the public to be responsible for matters concerning the unincorporated electoral area, which he or she represents. They have a dual role to represent the interest of the area, and then also to make decisions in the best interest of the region as a whole. So they are these single person representatives of their areas. They don't have a group of colleagues like a municipality does. And I suspect I've never been electoral area director. I imagine it is a pretty tough job. You will be asked to be stewards, or people will talk about you being a steward of your municipality, your electoral area, or regional district. So what is it exactly that you're stewarding? So I always like to go to the financial statements of the organizations and just sort of see, well, what does this organization spend, and what does it own? So I just went and looked at Cumberland, the Village of Cumberland, and please, staff people, if I'm wrong about this, I hope you'll tell me. So these are from the annual reports, the financial statements from 2021. And you'll see that expenses, this red circle there. So generally in 2021, broadly in 2021, the expenses of the District of Cumberland, the Village of Cumberland, was a little over $8 million. So even for a relatively small place, that's a fairly significant budget. If this was a business, you'd be thinking, okay, this is a big company with a fairly hefty budget. And then the other little number that I like to look at is the tangible capital assets of the local government. So this, again, Village of Cumberland. So over the years, the Village of Cumberland has accumulated about $65 million in assets. So the taxpayers have contributed, the assets, the buildings, the sidewalks, the pipes in the ground, the roads, the parks, they're worth about $65 million. And it's the council's job to look after that, to steward it, to care for it and maintain it. In Courtenay's case, the total expenses in 2021, about $52 million. And so quite a bit bigger. It's a bigger organization, and the capital assets, get this, $174 million. Again, big, a big amount of money, and the council is trusted by the voters to look after that. That's your job, to steward the expenditures and the assets of the corporation. And then I just went to the Comox Valley. Total expenses last year, 2021, were a little over $52 million. And the tangible capital assets, $288 million. Not insignificant amounts of money. And at the end of the day, it's the board or the council's responsibility to look after those things. So I really encourage you. All three organizations have superb annual reports full of fantastic information. If you want a little window into the world of the organization, the annual reports are a great resource, and the financial statements are attached at the end of them. So that definitely should be on your reading list before you decide to run. Just back to sort of how councils and boards work. All decisions are collective decisions. So I'm sorry to tell you that as individuals, you don't have any individual authority or power. You can't commit the corporation to anything. You can't promise, well, you can promise something, but you can't carry it out unless you have the majority of the council or board members with you. So all the decisions of councils or board are made collectively, not by individuals. I should caution, because electoral area directors are a little bit special in that regard, but for councils, for sure, and for the board as a whole, for sure, shared and collective decision making. So the council and board's role is to set direction and make decisions, and the staff's role is to give their best professional advice and to implement the council or the board's direction. And I just want to say a little bit about our system of how staff and elected officials relate to each other. This is universal in British Columbia, virtually universal across the country, though Premier Ford is thinking of modifying this a little bit. currently, but we have a system that's called a council manager system, where the citizens elect the council. The council elects a chief administrative officer, and the chief administrative officer is responsible for overseeing all of the operations. So the council board gives direction to the chief administrative officer, and he or she executes the direction. The council and the board doesn't direct the staff directly other than the chief administrative officer, and it's called the council manager system. And you'll sometimes hear people refer to a single employee rule, that council only has one employee, and that's the chief administrative officer. And that's where this comes from. The beauty of this system is that all the authority rests with the elected officials. You hold all of the authority to make decisions and give direction, and you hire professionals like those that are with us tonight to carry out the work of council. So it's not politicized in any way, and you hire well-qualified professionals to give you good advice and to execute your direction. And so if you look at the organizational charts, and also these are again in the annual reports, generally you can find them there. City of Courtenay, you can see this, the mayor and council hires the chief administrative officer, and then all the department heads are under that chief administrative officer. And the RCMP is kind of a sideways thing, because they are not employees of the city. They are, there's a contractual arrangement with them, and that's why they're up there on the right-hand side. Village of Cumberland, same thing. The Village of Council, Village Council hires the chief administrative officer, and then he or she oversees all of the staff of the organization. And finally, the regional district, same thing. Board of directors hires the chief administrative officer, and then he oversees the work of the rest of the organization. And just because regional districts are sort of special, they have these things that are off on the side. They're the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District and North Island 911, which are separate but connected. We have a tradition in British Columbia of a nonpartisan public service that I think we should be very proud of. So you can expect that your chief administrative officer and your staff will serve you in the same way that they'd served previous councils or boards, irrespective of your political ideology or your direction. And professionals in British Columbia, if they belong to the Local Government Management Association, commit to a code of ethics that includes nonpartisan public service, and they're committed to that by their profession and held accountable for that. So it's very, we have a very enviable system, I think, of public service across the country, and in British Columbia, especially in local government. So how do you get stuff done when you're elected? Because after the election, you want to get all kinds of stuff done. And how do you do that? This is always a really challenging, I get this question so often. So how do I make these promises in the campaign? So how do I get stuff done? Just a couple of things about that. Everything that you want done has to get on a council agenda, and it needs to be discussed by the council. You probably need the advice of your staff. And then anything that is going to be action needs to be, the decision of the council or the board needs to be made, and it's done either by a resolution or a bylaw. We can talk about that in a little more detail in a minute. And on councils, virtually all decisions are made by a simple majority, 3 of 5 or 4 of 7, 5 of 9 if it's a bigger council. In the regional district situation, the voting's much more complicated, and if you're elected, you'll have lots of onboarding and learning to do about the voting at the regional district. I just want to say just a couple of things about resolutions and bylaws. So what's the difference? How come you have resolutions sometimes? How come you have bylaws? And really, it's about the sort of seriousness of the matter. Some items of council or board can be made by simple resolution. Somebody makes a motion, somebody seconds it, there's discussion, question is called, there's a vote, and it's decided. Other things are mostly things that are required by provincial legislation that must be done by bylaw. It's a much more complicated process. I shouldn't say it's more complicated, they're just more steps in the process. So if you're rezoning a piece of property, for example, there are several readings of the bylaw, and there must be a public process of some kind. The public are notified. Sometimes they're given an opportunity to have their input at a public hearing, and it just takes longer. Generally can't happen at a single meeting. And bylaws are generally reserved for more serious matters that really can have an impact on people in the community. So that's really the difference. They're both decisions of a council or a board. If it's required by provincial legislation to be done by bylaw, it must be done by bylaw. And the bylaws have multiple steps. And you can talk at a council or a board meeting all you want, but if you don't pass a resolution or a bylaw, nothing will happen. So you actually have to take that step of making taking a vote and making a formal decision, which then is given to the staff to act on. This is often a mystery for people. What does a closed meeting or what does in camera mean? It really just means it's outside of the view of the public. The public can't see the discussion, they can't witness the discussion. And the default in British Columbia is that all of the work of councils and boards must be done in public. That's what the community charter says. That's the general rule, that meetings must be open to the public. And then there are a few exceptions. And I'm just going to touch on these at the highest level. And again, much more of this in your orientation and onboarding. But in very general terms, the three areas of exception are labor and personnel. And it's not all labor and personnel. It's just where the privacy of your personnel need to be respected. So if you were dismissing a chief administrative officer, you would generally do that in a closed meeting. Their privacy is protected. Some legal advice, if you're receiving the advice of your solicitor about a lawsuit that the municipality is involved in, you're allowed to take that into an in-camera meeting and hear it without the public being there, again, to protect the municipality, protect the corporation, and to reduce risk. And then there are certain kinds of land matters, like if you were acquiring a piece of land and you were talking about how much you're going to bid for a piece of property, you can do that in an in-camera meeting. Not all land matters, just some. So this is where your staff are super helpful. They understand this legislation and the case law really well, and they will guide you through what is legitimately a legitimate reason to be holding discussions in a closed meeting and what's not. You have to give notice to the public that you're holding a closed meeting. I have to explain why. What's the reason? Under what section of the Act are you holding a closed meeting? BC has pretty sophisticated rules around conflict of interest. The gist of it is that you're not to derive any personal gain from being an elected official, and there's good case law on this, and you must be very cognizant of this. And again, this is where your staff can be very helpful to help you to understand when you might be in a conflict of interest, and sometimes you need to get independent legal advice. And I just say that the declaration of conflict of interest is up to the individual. It's not for council to decide that you are in a conflict of interest. It's up to you to decide. And the risks all come to you. And the risks are quite significant because this is the one of the few reasons in BC why you can be removed from office. So in my time as an elected official in neighboring community, we had elected official, a councillor who got himself involved in a land transaction and ultimately was found to be in conflict of interest and was removed from office. There are not very many reasons in BC that you can be removed, but that's one of them. So you really want to have your eyes open on this one. What's the time commitment of being an elected official? It's significant. Takes lots of time, lots of reading, lots of talking. Going to the grocery store is a whole new experience because people will want to talk to you. And it'll be way more than you ever thought. And you have to be very organized and figure out how you're going to fit this in with the rest of your life, the time needed. I just want to say a couple things about collaborating, because I think this is really just so important. You want to be able to work with the other people around the table, even if you don't like them and you don't share their point of view, but you do need to find ways to work with them. So really listening, actively listening to what others are saying and really valuing different points of view. You will probably inevitably be on a very diverse council with people that look at things really differently than you do. And that's because you have a diverse community. Just think about how diverse the Comox Valley is. And you want a council that reflects that diversity. And it will make it particularly challenging to find ways to work together and to collaborate. You can really go a long ways by agreeing on your expectations and setting priorities early in the term, so that you know what to expect and you know what you're going to be working on over the 4 years. Collaborating at the regional board is just kind of a council on steroids. So you really want to be looking for things that you can do together that you can't do as individual municipalities or electoral areas. And there are lots of them, especially those big, expensive, capital intensive things like liquid waste plants or big trunk water treatment centers, landfills, regional parks. So those things that you can't do alone because you're just not big enough, that's when you can partner with your neighbors and look for things that you can do together. And by doing that, you're looking for efficiencies and economies of scale for sure. And look for ways to align your local municipal goals with the regional goals. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I just want to say this, so if you're elected, you will go through this process of coming together and forming, and then you probably pretty quickly find that some of the people around the table irritate you and there'll be some friction. And that's, you know, in sort of group dynamic world, that's called storming, and you'll be storming and kind of wrestling early on in your term of office. And if you're lucky, the group will gel and you'll find ways to collaborate and to work together. And that's when you can really start performing and really start accomplishing things. But you have to really go through those phases, and lots of councils get stuck in the storming phase. And I can't imagine how challenging it would be to spend 4 years, you know, in that sort of storming phase and never really get to the point where you're doing the things that you really stepped up to do as an elected official. So you might want to just think about that when you're first elected. Just a few things that you might want to spend some time looking at and thinking about before you get elected or while you're running in the campaign is to look at, really spend some time with your official community plan. You've got in Courtenay, a brand new, spanking, sparkly new official community plan. And there are rural plans in the electoral areas of the regional district. And of course, Cumberland has their official community plan. These are really, really powerful documents, and they set the path for the future, generally 20 to 30 years. And if you're running for office, you'll really want to know what's in those official community plans and really think about what the citizens have said the future of the community should be. So I really urge you to take a look, all available on the websites of the regional district and the municipalities. one of the ways that local governments in BC have begun to think about their official community plans, because they generally are produced by a very significant effort, multi-year effort by the municipality, really engaging the community, talking to the community, hearing what they want in their community. And so now, and this is out of the Courtenay plan, you can see that the official community plan is driving the council's strategic plan, and which drives the department business plans, the work plans, which drives the annual budget and the 5-year financial plans, and then it's reported out in the annual report. And so you can just see how important and powerful that official community plan has become. And this is now the typical way I see municipalities thinking of their official community plans. So as an elected official, you want to have a good sense of what's in that official community plan and where the people have said that they want their community to go. And equally important is the regional growth strategy. So Comox Valley has a regional growth strategy. It's a shared vision for managing growth and community impacts in the region. It's a commitment made by the regional district and the member municipalities and electoral areas to work together. And it's implemented in large part through local official community plans, infrastructure plans, and other tools. So you really want to take a look at the regional growth strategy and have a good sense of what's in it. And I understand that in this term of office, there is an indication that you're going to be renewing the RGS. So that should be super, super exciting time, super important and interesting thing to be a part of if you're an elected official, I think. Being elected official has a steep learning curve, as you probably sense from this little marathon that I've just taken you through. Very steep learning curve when you're first elected, and you might want to give yourself time to take in the kind of information that amount of information that you'll have coming at you. Again, I'd like to suggest a reading list of the official community plan, the annual report, strategic plan, and a really super interesting document called the meeting procedure bylaw. But the meeting procedure bylaw lays out the meeting rules and the rules around how councils do their work. And I think every council should turn its mind to its meeting procedure bylaw right at the beginning of the term so that everybody understands the rules. So I would suggest that you take a look at all those 4 documents. They're all available online at the municipalities and at the regional district, and they will give you a really good picture into the world of the organization. And I just show you this because there'll be lots of learning opportunities. There'll be things that are in-house, so the strategic planning and in-house workshops and lunch and learns throughout the 4-year term, and of course the post-election onboarding and orientation. And then every year, the Union of BC Municipalities has a convention in September. The Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities have an annual conference. Fantastic learning opportunities. Go and see what your colleagues across the province are concerned about. There's tons of clinics and presentations. Really a fantastic resource, I think, and all kind of BC specific. It's really relevant information. And then the Local Government Leadership Academy has a forum every year, and a leadership forum. So really wonderful opportunity to go and again, meet your colleagues and to hear what's really top of mind across BC. And that's me. That's my whirlwind run through local government in BC. And so we can take any questions if there are any. I haven't been interrupted by you guys, so no questions.
So thank you, Allison, for the great presentation. I'm sure the details presented have sparked some interesting questions in the group. If you're online, you can now enter a question into the Q&A found at the bottom of the Zoom window or submit a thumbs up to a similar question. I see we already have a question in there about what is a senior planner, so we'll ask that in a second. As a reminder, we are recording this session, so we ask that when you ask a question in the Q&A, you tick the anonymous box. That way you're not identified. If you're calling in to us today, which I know we have one caller on the line, we will unmute those of you who have called in once we have finished all the online questions. For callers, once we unmute you, you'll receive a prompt to press *6 to unmute your phone. Say I have a question. Depending on the number of call-in attendees, you can either speak right away, or we'll say the last 4 digits of the phone number. I believe we just have one call-in number though. For your privacy, do not identify yourself on the phone. Finally, we're just asking everyone to keep your questions respectful and be respectful of others. We will do our best to move through the questions fairly quickly. For any questions that may not be answered, we will post the responses on the local government election pages along with this video so other people who are not able to attend can watch it. Okay, so let's get to the questions that have come through online. We have one question so far. What does a senior city planner do?
Well, planners in general are responsible for sort of two different areas of responsibility. One is the sort of the current planning area, sort of managing development applications and rezoning applications and that kind of stuff, the stuff that is happening today in the community. And then the other sort of part of planning is long range planning, managing the official community plan and strategies looking well into the future. So current planning and long-term planning. My role at the city of Nanaimo was a bit of both actually, and I had a number of special projects that I was responsible for, including downtown revitalization and heritage conservation and a whole bunch of different things. And then ultimately I was assistant to the administrator, managing kind of the day-to-day work of the municipality.
Thanks,
I haven't been asked a question like that in a long time, boy.
Are there any other questions from the group of anybody who's online that would like to pick Allison's brain while we have her here today?
Yeah, and don't be shy, especially as one of the things that I always worry about when I do a presentation like this is local government is full of acronyms like AVICC and UBCM and OCPs and go on. So if there are any like really simple questions, things that I said that you just don't understand or you want to just figure out what that means, yeah, please ask away. Either that or I put everybody to sleep.
I have a question, Allison, and I'm not even in
Go for it,
there's no other questions coming in. So what was the one thing that you learned the most while being in office?
Well, I think it was a much harder job than I thought it was going to be. And, I had been working in local government for quite a long time. And I naively thought that I knew stuff. And it was such an interesting experience to go from one side of the table, the staff side of the table, to the other side of the table. And to actually have to make the decisions. It was much, much more difficult than I really expected it to be. And I think the other part of it was I was really surprised by how visible you were. And this was especially true when I became mayor. That you felt when you walked into a room, people said, oh, the mayor's here. Like you become very visible. And even though I'm an extrovert in many ways, I really found that challenging to manage and how to manage your private life and your privacy with being such a public person. And it's funny because when I talk to other elected officials and I make the reference to the grocery store, the experience of grocery shopping will be different. They always laugh because it's just so true. You go into the grocery store and you're just there to get, some butter and some bread and some milk. And 45 minutes later, you've had all these conversations with people, and it just changes how you function in your community. So I think those were surprises, and they were real learning experiences for me. I'll add too, though, I did an interview with CBC recently, and the interviewer asked me kind of a general question, like, what was being an elected official like? And my immediate response was, when things were going well, it was awesome. And when things were not going so well, it was really terrible. And I think, I sort of laughed at myself afterwards because I thought, oh my God, that was such an honest answer. And it's so true, when you could really do things, when you could make things happen and kind of, fulfill what you wanted to do when you ran for office, like, it is incredible. It's amazing because you really have the ability to make things different. And that's fantastic. But when things are really tough, there's not enough money to go around, or you have to make a decision that really makes some people unhappy, or you can't solve homelessness, it's terrible, and it keeps you awake at night. So you have to hang on those moments when you really do things that are really good. In my time, we revised the official community plan. I'm happy to say that, many years later, still the bulk of that is standing. I feel very good about that. We did a wonderful road reconstruction project that provided bike lanes and pedestrian safety and some beautiful plantings, some magnolia trees that bloom every spring. That is awesome. That's really great work. But the tough choices were really tough.
Thank you, Allison. We've got 2 more questions that have come in. So I sparked the interest. What are the main areas of responsibility for city council as opposed to provincial governments?
What a great question. Wow. And, I think such an important discussion to be having these days, because we have seen over time more and more responsibility shifting to local governments without really the necessary resources. Most municipalities rely on property taxes for their revenues. But the vast majority of revenues come from property taxes. And without going into a big rabbit hole, this is regressive taxes. This hurts people who are poorer more than it impacts people who have lots of resources. So it's a very kind of crude funding source. And historically, the property taxes were to fund services to property. So things like water, sewer, land use planning, sidewalks, roads, services to property. But over time, local governments have just ended up taking on more and more of what we call the soft services. So social housing, homelessness, drug addiction. We just seem to be getting drawn more and more into those areas, and which have been historically the responsibility of the provincial and federal governments. And it has really strained the capacity of local governments, both financially and in terms of staff, because the social services are not areas where local governments have necessarily had professional staff. So it's been really, really challenging. So the simple answer to that question is local governments do what the provinces allow them to do through the legislation. And then kind of by default, what they get drawn into by the provincial and federal governments. And it's become increasingly challenging, I think, financially for local governments to be clear about what they do and what they don't do.
Thank you, Allison. That was a great answer. Another great question has come through. What was the thing you were most proud of doing well in office?
Well, I think I think the two things I mentioned, the revision of the official community plan that I like to think had really long lasting impact, because when I was first elected, my community, which is 70% of the land, is in the agricultural land reserve. There's a tremendous amount of development pressure, and the community was really in a crisis over whether or not to develop rural and agricultural land. And I think that in the terms of office that I was in, not because of me, but because of the council, that they we I think in large part managed to settle that debate, which was good. But the other thing I'm very proud of is that particular road reconstruction project. And in fact, I had my daughter, who's grown now, came home sometime, and I guess it must have been this spring, and she said to me, "Oh, Mom, I just drove through Brentwood Bay and those magnolias are all blooming." And she said, "It always makes me think of you." And I'm very proud of that. And again, to just think that my daughter, sort of, who was quite young at the time, makes that connection. Oh, and and it wasn't my doing. Those magnolias were not my doing. I played a little part in it. But she somehow connects that with, okay, good things happened. My mom was part of it. That's a really great, that's a great feeling. And it wasn't easy because it was a lot of money and there was opposition and we had to cut down trees, and yeah, it wasn't easy to do it. But the outcome has been very positive, I think.
I would agree. Those magnolias on Brentwood Bay do look beautiful.
Oh, see, and you know about them. There you go.
Yeah.
I should say that I had, I was very lucky to sit on 3 very good councils with very good people. And I made some, lifelong friends, and we worked, 95% of the time really, really well together. I was very fortunate.
We have another great question that's come through. This is going to be a good one for you to answer. Can you speak of the distinction between regional and municipal governments, and how much input can a city have in a regional development?
It's hard to know exactly what the question is asking for, but in your case, your municipalities are represented on a regional board. It's a fairly big board, and you have a voice. But it's like a council in many ways. The majority is, you have to persuade others. Like if you have a particular perspective on a development, you have to persuade others to come along with you, right? That your perspective, your point of view, how you're going to vote is in the best interests of the region, of the municipality. So again, it's about persuasion, it's about collaboration, it's about finding ways to work with others, and that's where your influence really comes from. If maybe you just have 1 vote on the regional board, maybe you have 4 votes on the regional board. At the end of the day, no one member jurisdiction dominates, and you have to work with others and find ways to get the majority to move in your direction. That's why these negotiation skills and collaboration skills are so valuable. If you look at the veterans who are really good at sitting on a council or working on a regional board, that's what they have. They have collaboration skills. They know how to work with other people and to get people to move, to agree with them. And so it's not about any absolute ability to dominate or influence. It's about these softer collaboration skills. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Allison. Are there any more questions to be brought in online? If so, send them through right now. Otherwise, we'll head over to the caller on the phone to see if that individual has any questions. All right, so the caller on the phone, do you have any questions for Allison at this point?
Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. Do you have any questions for Allison?
The last question she asked was actually mine, and I think she more or less addressed it. What I was sort of getting at was just about because you know, a municipal growth strategy is a smaller area geographically, and if you're to talk about, you know, I guess managing larger infrastructure projects between groups such as planning for transit further into the future, I'm just wondering where, like, how long these processes can take, and I guess it's difficult for me to put in words, I guess, but I hope that helps clarify a bit.
Well, just to respond to how long it takes to revise an official community plan or a regional growth strategy, you know, I know people won't want to hear this, but I always encourage councils and boards to start working on this as soon as you're elected, because it could take 2 years, could take 3 years, could take 4 years, could take the better part of your term to update an official community plan or a regional growth strategy, which is in many ways even more complicated just because there are more people, more jurisdictions involved. So I think you know, government moves slowly, and that's good in my view, because you want to really do these things thoughtfully and deliberately, and you want to have really good information and really good research to ground your decisions. But it will either updating an official community plan or redrafting an RGS will take the better part of your term. And it'll take a whole lot of resources of the organization. It's a big job in both cases, and really, but like really important. And lots of communities kind of shy away from doing this because it's expensive and it takes a long time. But you think about laying a plan for your community or for your region for the next 20 years or 30 years. It's so important to do that. It's so important to make sure that your infrastructure is sufficient to accommodate climate change, to accommodate growth, in some cases to accommodate shrinkage. Like, you want to anticipate the change in your community. And really one of the primary ways you do that is with your regional growth strategy and your official community plan. So it's super important that you do it, and it's super important that those plans are current and thoughtful. But it'll take a lot of money and a lot of time. Not probably music to anybody's ears, I'm sure. But you know, I bet you the City of Courtenay feels really good that the OCP got passed. And I mean, I'm an outsider, so I just had a look at it, but it looks wonderful, and it looks like it was a very thoughtful process and engaging in really difficult times, in time of COVID. I mean, God, what could be worse? So, but it probably feels very good to have that in place and have a modern OCP ready for the next council.
Great, Allison. I'm going to ask the caller on the line, do you have another question before we mute you again, or are you good to go?
Thank you very much. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions that have come in online. So Allison, what was something on your wish list you didn't get to do, and would you run again?
No, never. No. No, you know, I think you know, I've done my bit. I've had my time, and it was great. I mean, if you think about it, gosh, you know, a very tiny percentage of our population gets the opportunity to be elected officials, to represent people, to make decisions on their behalf, you know. So it's a very, I think it's a very privileged position. And I think back, I don't regret having done it. I think it was kind of an amazing life experience. Being mayor was just like a crazy, amazing life experience. You get to be a part of things and see things that, you know, you just wouldn't otherwise. So that was really fun. But no, I've done my time. I'm happy to be invisible in the grocery store and just go and buy the quart of milk. Really, I like that a lot. What was something that I didn't get done that I wished we had? We had, it wasn't so much about not getting things done as some decisions were made subsequently that I'm not super happy about. We tried very hard. I mean, this sounds so simple when I say this, but you know, it still hasn't got done. We tried really hard to build a skate park. I'd love to see a BMX park. I'd like to be able to ride in the BMX park. And I'm just really sad that we haven't, my community just hasn't got there. And my council's tried very hard to make that happen. And it's funny because I was just thinking about this the other day, and I just don't know why it's been so hard. I'm just not sure what has been the barrier. We had sponsors, the Lions Club was prepared to put up money, but we're just not successful. And I think we haven't done a very good job of having those kind of local, low-tech kind of rec opportunities. I mean, we have a fantastic rec center and all that, but I just like to see some of these low-tech things that kids can go and hang out at and play on. And yeah, we just haven't got there. So that's the one that comes immediately to mind.
I ride BMX, and so I understand why it's great to
Yeah,
have a BMX
love
track.
to roll over some of that dirt, right?
It's a great thing to have in a community for the children, that's for sure. So we have another great question that came in. When can you change a growth strategy? It seems as though they're amended often. What are the guidelines there?
Oh, gee, I'd be surprised if it's amended often. Jake, can you, is that the case in the Comox Valley?
No, yeah. So it's a highly legislated process, and like you spoke to earlier, that requires the cooperation and agreement of many different parties. So yeah, not amended frequently, but certainly you know, zoning bylaws are amended frequently, those types of things, but not the RGS.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my experience too. That would be my experience in my own community and in the CRD. I would say the RGS, I don't know if it's ever been amended, and I know in my own community there was a challenge to the RGS, and in the end it was a legal challenge. It failed, and the RGS was kept intact. And you know, I like to think of official community plans as also being very long standing and ought not to be amended frequently. I mean, if you have a long-term plan, it's well thought through, it's, you know, well grounded in good research and information. I'd like to think that you wouldn't be amending it all the time. And on my council, we adopted a policy that we'd only even consider OCP amendments once a year. And I don't think in my term of office we ever actually amended the OCP. We updated it, but I don't think we actually ever amended it midway between, you know, communities review their OCPs every 5 to 10 years, somewhere in there. And at that time you would consider potential amendments, but it's probably ill-advised to be frequently amending an OCP. Rezonings, that's a whole different matter. As generally you change the zoning to be consistent with the official community plan, and you know, that's pretty much a regular part of business of most municipalities.
Thanks everyone for submitting questions. We have a few more minutes left before the close of the session. So if you have any additional last questions you want to send through the Q&A, please do so now. I'll wait a minute or so and then I'll pass it over to Allison to close everything up. All right, it looks like no questions are coming through. So thank you everyone for taking the time to submit those questions and have the conversation.
So I just want to commend you all for thinking about running for office and encourage you on, because I really, you can see that I sort of love local government. I think it's super important that we support our communities and play an important role in our communities. And there really can be no better way than to be an elected official. And I think you're courageous. And I encourage you on and wish you all good luck in the campaign and in the election. And I'll be watching on election night, Civic Info, watching the results. So yeah, good luck to you all, and thanks all for joining us tonight.